Ever since Toy Story premiered in 1995, Pixar has provided us with some of the most memorable and touching films of the last 20-odd years. And they've never shied away from plot points that are so overwhelmingly sad, they bring forth the waterworks from grown men and women worldwide. Which is pretty impressive, because who would have thought that a robot, dinosaur, or toy cowboy could make you cry like that? So much crying, guys. I'm Elissa with Frederator, and it's time to grab your box of tissues because we're counting down the 10 most tear-jerking Pixar moments. Let's get started. The Good Dinosaur, Arlo's father's death. You know this is going to be a heavy list when the lowest ranking moment is a child witnessing his father get crushed to death by a tidal wave. Although, to be fair, if you've ever seen The Lion King, you probably sensed this one coming a mile away. Not that watching a child get saved by his father, then witnessing the father's death gets any less sad with repeated viewings. Yet the scene is extra heart-wrenching because Arlo's father Henry is angry with his son when the scene begins, and although the incident isn't Arlo's fault, it wouldn't have happened if he had just done what his father had asked, and so horrible pangs of a child's self-inflicted guilt begin. It's the kind of tragically complicated situation Pixar does best, because even though Arlo may feel responsible for his father's death, how would he, and the audience, feel if he had killed Spot? Pixar's newest film would have taken the number 10 spot either way. Number 9. Monsters, Inc., Boo and Sully say goodbye. The growth of the bond between Boo and her big kitty Sully is arguably one of the most touching relationship arcs in Pixar's history. But of course, the whole film is about Mike and Sully's struggle to send Boo home, and the implications of that don't really settle in until the deed is almost done and Sully realizes he'll never see her again. There's something incredibly agonizing about the way Boo's excitement upon re-entering her room is pitted against Sully's profound melancholy. Dare you not to cry as he takes that long last look at Boo before closing the door. But Pixar delivers the old 1-2 punch, and your tears of sadness are transformed into tears of joy minutes later as Mike reveals he's been constructing the door. We see Sully's face grow into a smile of pure bliss as he hears the cry of Kitty one more time. Fade to black, theater lights go up, and now you and your friends don't make eye contact immediately because you're all crying. Number 8. Toy Story 2, When Somebody Loved Me. With the When Somebody Loved Me sequence, you almost wonder if Toy Story 2's writers were sitting around a conference table debating how to make Jesse's backstory as sad as possible. As with many of its memorably tearful moments, the song gains its potency from its relatability. We all had a favorite toy as a kid that we eventually abandoned because we grew up. And yet growing up is inevitable. Relationships are bound to change, and we all have to learn to cope with losses that can never be regained. Pixar's Toy Story series gave us a symbol for what we all lost when we became adults, and then made the point even more painful by giving that symbol the ability to explain that loss right back to you. Number 7. WALL-E. WALL-E doesn't remember Eve. In WALL-E, Pixar attained the near impossible by making the audience fall head over heels for a rusty robot with an exceedingly limited vocabulary. We're looking at you, Pokemon. You could learn something here. The trick here is that even with his limited modes of expression, Pixar humanizes every metallic inch of WALL-E and his love interest Eve. So when WALL-E's memory is wiped and he epitomizes the loss of that personality by beginning to take trash cubes of his own belongings, as he was originally programmed to do, we all feel like we've lost our best friend. Eve's own feelings of horror and loss only amplify the scene's emotional power. And if you weren't crying by the time she touches her forehead to WALL-E's, you certainly are now. The gesture is so heartbreakingly simple and human that it perfectly communicates love and loss. Luckily, the resulting spark makes WALL-E come too, and you might actually have enough time to clear your eyes of tears in the final seconds of the film. Number 6. Inside Out. Riley runs away. Inside Out is basically one long foray into what doctors have clinically termed the feels. Pixar displays its ultimate mastery over your heartstrings by extracting human thought into 5 characters and using them to illustrate that crucial point in everyone's life, when happy childhood memories start to, literally, become tinged with sadness, and when real loneliness and remorse is felt for the first time. Many of us can identify with the desperation Riley reaches as her depression bottoms out and she can only think to do something drastic, like run away. But the real tear-jerking moment is when she returns home from the bus, and after all of her struggle to keep Riley the happy, bubbly kid she once was, Joy recognizes that it's time to let sadness take over. We see Riley tear up and finally be honest with her parents, and see vividly how she's overwhelmed by her loneliness, her feelings of helplessness, and the pressure of the expectation to act in a manner she no longer identifies with. Chances are you're crying right along with her. Number 5. Finding Nemo. Coral and the eggs get eaten. Finding Nemo's opening scene shows how quickly tragedy can can strike, making someone transition immediately from utter joy to astounding loss. Not only does Marlin lose his wife, but he also has to cope with the fact that a barracuda ate over 400 of his children. 400! No wonder he becomes so overprotective. The opener reminds us all how a lightning-fast, random event can change the course of an entire life. Just think of poor Nemo's fin, for one. The scene is even more tragic because Marlin tries his best to save his wife and children, but is quickly knocked out. And then he wakes up and discovers his loss and names the one remaining egg Nemo in memory of his wife's wishes. And then, title. Hey kids, welcome to Finding Nemo. It's gonna be a great time. I mean, no, we promise. It's gonna be fun. Number 4, Toy Story 3, The Incinerator. Of course, it's not just enough for Pixar to very nearly kill the crew of characters we've spent 3 whole films learning to know and love. They have to make it existential. Seeing Woody, Buzz, Jessie, and the gang slowly, oh so slowly, slip towards their fiery doom would be tear-inducing by itself. But what makes this scene downright terrifying is how the characters realize that their struggle away from the incinerator fire is in vain, and we subsequently watch them cope with the inevitability of their own death. When Jessie screams, "What do we do?" and Buzz's solution is to look her straight in the eye and give her his hand, the audience witnesses a profound kind of heroism that is too dark and downright scary for most films to tackle, let alone a children's movie. Think about it. You're staring death straight in the face and you know that all you can do to make the situation better is to be with your loved ones when it happens. Speaking purely from a mental processes point of view, this may be the darkest moment in Disney history. So before we all spend too much time thinking about it, let's move on to brighter things. Just kidding. Number 3, Inside Out, Bing-Bong's self-sacrifice. In a film packed front to back with little gut punches, the biggest one comes from Bing-Bong, Riley's former imaginary friend who sacrifices himself to save Joy. Chances are you have either forgotten about your childhood imaginary friend or not thought about them in a long time. And this simple fact made us all love Bing-Bong from the moment he appears. But that affinity turns on you and makes his sacrifice seem hauntingly personal, as if we subjected our own imaginary friends to the same terrible, tragic fate. Like the toys in Toy Story, he is symbolic of what we all lost as we leave childhood and become adults. But in Inside Out, we must watch that part of ourselves physically disappear before our eyes. And that's not even getting into the tragic nature of Bing-Bong's personal heroics. He sacrifices himself because he cares deeply for the well-being of someone who has long forgotten about his very existence. Pixar originally had a longer cut of this scene that was supposed to be even sadder, if you can believe it, like Bambi's mom level sad. As is, it's the kind of scene that tempts a watcher to pause the film so they can go outside to be alone with their thoughts for a second. Number 2, Toy Story 3, Andy gives his toys away. Still recovering from the incinerator scene? Great, guess what? You're crying again. And if you happen to literally grow up with Toy Story and had just graduated high school when Toy Story 3 came out, you and all of your friends, no matter how cool you thought you were downright slobbering from this scene and kept your 3D glasses on for just a little too long once the theater lights went up. We've talked a lot in this video about how Pixar has perfectly captured the painful, pivotal moments as a child becomes an adult. In this scene, Andy is literally about to go off to college and enter adulthood head on, but he has retained enough of his childhood to be able to play with his old toys and to acknowledge what all of these toys, especially Woody, have meant to him. Remember that old toy we talked about? Do you know where it is? I bet you want to hug that toy right now, don't you? Andy's final playtime shows us that yes, we all grow up and move on and experience loss, but that doesn't mean we've lost everything. Number 1, Up, Carl and Ellie. There are very few moments in film that can be described as perfect, but the internet seems pretty much unanimous on this one. Not only is the opening sequence of Up the saddest moment in Pixar's very impressive catalog of tearjerkers, in just 10 minutes, Pixar sets up 2 characters and illustrates their entire life together. Just the pure childlike love between Carl and Ellie and the subsequent image of Carl sitting alone at Ellie's funeral is enough to make anyone cry. But of course, this sequence is more complex than that. We're dealing with Pixar after all. No, the real icing on the tear-soaked cake is the way this sequence illustrates how, even with the best intentions and true effort, sometimes dreams and promises just can't be followed through, which is a tough reminder for any age group. And it's all done through body language. From Ellie finding out she can't bear children, to the continual smashing of the Paradise Falls jar, to the purchased tickets that are never able to be used, we're reminded how life always has the power to get in the way of our most dearly cherished plans. In other words, the sequence is heart-wrenchingly sad for its brutal honesty. And on that uplifting note, we hope you enjoyed watching the 10 most tear-jerking Pixar moments. What tear-jerking moment did we miss? Which one gets you every time? Let us know in the comments. And maybe now would be a good time to go to Channel Frederator and check out some of our happier offerings. Because remember, Frederator loves you.